So I'll tell you a funny story before I start with reading. My mom's passed on, but she was still with us. She was like, "Don't tell the people that. That's bragging." And it's like, "Don't think you're better than nobody." I said, I don't think I'm better than nobody. I'm doing all right though. So me and my partner are building a house, and I grew up dirt floor poor, like just. Like, I remember my first three-piece suit. My dad wore a coat, my brother wore a vest, and I wore pants. And so when you grow up like that, you know, you eat, like my partner still tells me, "Why do you eat the whole loaf of bread?" I eat heels and all. Can't waste nothing. And so we're building a house, and we were talking to the designer, and he was like, "Hey, Mr. Cosby, what must-haves must you have?" And I said, I just want an office. Because right now I read all my books in my recliner, and I have a desk lamp. I have and my cat sits in my feet, and then he wants to write too, so he'll jump in my lap sometimes. I'm gonna write too, ampersand, number sign. And my partner, when we were talking to the office, the guy was like, "How big do you want it?" And I said, "I don't know, 10 by 20. I want to do it with a lock. That's all I want. Like, I'm gonna do it. I can lock it and like write, and nobody can bother me." And my partner, God bless her, she said, "No, it needs to be bigger than that." And then she started like naming like all the awards I won. And I was so embarrassed, but also like so moved that she remembered that. And when you start naming some of them, it's like, I forgot I won that one. Because I got the Dashiell Hammond Award, and I had won it last year, and it didn't arrive till this year. And it came in the mail, and I didn't know what it was. And so I opened it up, like, is this a falcon? What is this? And my partner, who's smarter than me, she's like, "It's the Dashiell Hammond Award. Look at the bottom." I'm like, oh. I say all that to say that I'm incredibly blessed to be here with you guys tonight. I'm incredibly blessed to come where I come from and be able to do the things that I do and tell the stories that I'm able to tell. My mom, again, used to say to me, she's like, "Look, you're only good at a couple things. It's like, you can cook a little bit, you can dance a little bit. Only your mama can get away with telling you can dance a little bit for a big boy and not have a problem." And she said, "But you can write." And writing is the one thing that has been a constant in my life that has helped me and sustained me. And I'm so incredibly honored that all of you who have taken my books and connected with them. It makes me feel incredibly grateful. I'm incredibly humbled to be with y'all tonight. So thank y'all for coming. You could have been anywhere. I like to think that the air conditioner has nothing to do with it, but y'all are here. And so what I thought I'd do is I would read one of the prologue in the first chapter of All Sinners Believe, and then I'll talk about where the book came from, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. Is that okay? All right, good enough. As you say, I bring y'all greetings from Mayor's Baptist Church, one accord. All right, so we'll get started. Charon County. Charon County was founded in bloodshed and darkness, literally and figuratively. Even the name is enveloped in shadows and morbidity. Legend has it that the name of the county was supposed to be Charlotte or Charles, but the town elders waited too late, and those names were already taken by the time they decided to incorporate their fledgling encampment. As the story goes, they just moved their finger down the list of names until they settled on Charon. Those men, weathered as wet leather with hands like splitting maws, bestowed the name of their new town with no regard to its macabre nature. Or perhaps they just liked the name because a river flowed through the county and emptied into the Chesapeake Bay like the river Styx. Who knows? Who could know the thoughts of those long dead men? What is known is that in 1805, in the dead of night, a group of white landowners, chafing at the limits of their own manifest destiny, set fire to the last remaining indigenous village on that teardrop-shaped peninsula that would become Charon County. And those who escaped the flames brought down by muskets with no regard to age, gender, or infirmity. And that was the first of many tragedies in the history of Charon. There was the cannibalism of the winter of 1853, the malaria outbreak of 1901, the United Daughters of the Confederacy picnic poisoning of 1935, the Danforth family murder-suicide of 1957, the tent revival baptismal drownings of 1968, and on and on and on. The soil of Charon County, like most towns and counties in the South, was sown with a generation of tears. They were places where violence and mayhem were celebrated, It's the pillars of a pioneering spirit every Founders Day in the county square. Blood and tears, violence and mayhem, love and hate. These were the rocks upon which the South was built. They were the foundation upon which Charon County stood. If you had an occasion to ask some of the citizens of Charon, most of them will tell you those things were in the past, that they have been washed away by the river of time that flows ever forward. They might even say those things should be forgotten and left to the ages. But if you had asked Sheriff Titus Crown, well, he would have said that anyone who believed that was a fool or a liar or both. And if you had an occasion to speak with him after that long October in 2017, he would have told you that maybe the foundation of Charon was rotten and fetid and full of corruption, not only corruption of the flesh, but of the soul. That maybe the rocks the South was built upon were shifting and splitting like the stone Moses struck with his staff. But instead of water, only blood and ichor would come pouring forth. He might touch the scars on his face or the ones on his chest and lock eyes with you and say in that harsh whisper that was now his speaking voice, the South doesn't change. You know, you can try to hide the past, but it comes back in ways worse than the way it was before. Terrible ways. He might sigh and look away and say, nah, the South doesn't change. Just the names and the dates and the faces. And sometimes even though they don't change, not really. Sometimes it's the same day, the same faces, waiting for you when you close your eyes, waiting for you in the dark. Chapter 1. Titus woke up 5 minutes before his alarm went off at 7 a.m. and made himself a cup of coffee and the curate Darlene had gotten him for Christmas last year. At the time she'd given it to him, he thought it was an expensive gift for a relationship that was barely 4 months old. But these days, Titus had to admit, it was a damn good gift and he was grateful to have it. He'd gotten her a bottle of perfume. He almost winced thinking back on it. If knowing your lover was a competition, Darlene was a gold medalist. And Titus didn't even qualify for the bronze. Over the last 10 months, he forced himself to get exponentially better in the gift-giving department. He took a sip of the coffee. His last girlfriend, before Darlene, had said he was a great boyfriend, but awful at relationships. He didn't dispute that assessment. He took a deep breath and then took another sip. He heard the stairs creak as his father made his way down to the kitchen. That mournful cry of ancient wood had gotten him and his brother Marquise in trouble on more than one late Friday night until Titus stopped staying out late and Marquise stopped coming home. Hey, why you standing there in your boxes? Make me one of them fancy cups of coffee, Albert Crown said. Titus watched his father limp over to the kitchen table and ease himself down in one of their vinyl-covered metal chairs that would drive a hipster interior designer mad with nouveau retro euphoria. It had been a year since his father's hip replacement, and Albert still walked with a steady caution. He stubbornly refused to use a cane, but Titus saw the way his smooth brown face twisted into a tight Gordian knot when a rainstorm blew in off the bay or when the temperature started to drop like a lead sinker. Albert Crown had made his living on that bay for 40 years, hauling in crab pots 6 days a week, 14 hours a day, off the shores of Piney Island, on boats owned by folks who barely saw him as a man. No insurance, no 401k. But all those backbreaking days and the fragility of Titus's mother had allowed him to build a 3-bedroom house on French Neck Road. They were the only family, black or white, that had a house on an actual foundation. Envy had crossed the color lines and united the neighbors as the house rose from the forest of mobile homes that surrounded it like a rose among weeds. When we retire, we can sit on the front step in matching rocket chairs and wave to Patsy Jones as she drives by rolling her eyes, Titus's mother Helen had told his father at the kitchen table one night in one of those rare weekends his father wasn't out gallivanting at the watering hole of Grace's place. Titus put a cup in the Keurig, slid hard in the filter, and set the time. He took another deep breath. Like so many things in life, his mother's gently petty retirement plan was not meant to be. She died long before she could ever retire from Cunningham Flag Factory. And Patsy Jones was still driving by, and still rolling her eyes. "Which one you putting there?" Albert asked. He opened the newspaper and started running his finger over the pages. Titus could see his lips move ever so slightly. His mother had been the more adventurous reader, but his father never let the sun set on a day without going through the newspaper. "Hazelnut, the only one you like," Titus said. Albert chuckled. "Hey, don't tell that girl that. She got us that whole value pack. That was nice of her." He licked his finger and turned the page. As soon as he did, he sucked his teeth and grunted. "Them rubbish boys don't never let up, do they? They ain't gonna have a goddamn parade for that statue. Them boys just mad somebody finally had the nerve to tell them about the murdering traitors of a granddaddy." Albert spat. "Ricky Sowers and them sons of the Confederate boys been knocking on my door in the past 2 weeks," Titus said. "What for?" Albert asked. Titus shrugged. "They want to make sure the sheriff office will fulfill its duties and maintain crowd control in case any protesters show up. You know, since Ricky is Caucasian and I'm biased against him because of my cultural background," Titus said. He kept his voice flat and even the way he learned in the bureau, but he caught his father's eyes over the top of the newspaper. Albert laughed again and shook his head. "That Sowers boy wouldn't have said that to Ward Bennings. Hell, Ward would have probably marched with him with his star on his chest. Cultural background. Shit. You mean because you black and he's a racist? Lord, son, I don't know how you do it sometimes," Albert said. "Easy, Pop. I just imagine Sherman kicking their murderous traitorous great-grandfather in the teeth. That's my zen," Titus said. His voice stayed flat, but Albert burst out laughing. "Boy, you crazy. You know, we was down at the store last Friday. Lynn was last asked one of them boys with the sticker on his truck. Why don't they put a statue up to, what's that boy name? The one with them eggs?" Albert said. "You mean Benedict Arnold, Pop?" Yeah, build a statue to that boy since they like traitors so goddamn much." That boy said something about heritage and history, and Lynn said, "All right, how about a statue to Nat Turner?" That boy got in his truck and spun tires and rolled coal on us. But he didn't have an answer, Albert said. Titus narrowed his eyes. "You get a license plate number? What the truck look like?" "Nah, son, we was too busy laughing. Look like every truck them kind of boys drive. Jacked up to the sky, not a lick of dirt in the bed. They do them trucks just like some of them fellas do them boats on the bay. Using working man tools for toys," Albert said. Titus finished his coffee. He rinsed out the cup and set it in the sink. "They don't care about Benedict Arnold, Pop. He didn't hate the same people they do. I'm going to go get dressed. I'm on till 9. There's still some beef stew left from Sunday in the refrigerator. You can have that for supper," Titus said. "Boy, I ain't so old I can't make my own supper. Who taught you how to cook anyway?" Albert asked. Titus felt the tight smile work his way across his face. "You did," he said. "But," Titus thought, "not until Mom had been in the ground and you finally found Jesus." "Damn right I did. I mean, I'll probably eat the stew anyway, but I can still cook up something in the kitchen," Albert said with a wink. Titus shook his head and headed for the stairs. "Hey, maybe I'll get some oysters and we can put a fire to that old grill up this weekend. Get your trifling brother to come over," Albert said. Titus paused with his foot on the first step. He stiffened for a minute before continuing up the stairs. Marquise wasn't coming over this or any other weekend. And the fact that his father still clung to the idea was at various times depressing and infuriating. Marquise worked for himself as a self-taught carpenter. He stayed on the other side of the county in the Windy River Trailer Park, but he might as well have been in Nepal. Even though he made his own hours, they could go months without seeing him. And in a place small as Charon, that was a dubious achievement. Titus went to his bedroom and opened his closet. His everyday clothes were on wire hangers to the left, but his uniform was on wooden hangers to the right. He didn't refer to his everyday clothes as civilian wardrobe. That gave his uniforms a level of militarization he didn't like. His everyday clothes were color coordinated and hung in alphabetical order. Blacks first, then blues, then reds, and so on. Darlene had once commented that he was the most organized man she'd ever met. His shoes were ordered in the exact same manner. Kelly, his former girlfriend, from time to time, used to rearrange his clothes whenever she spent the night. She said she did it for his own good. "Gotta loosen you up, Virginia. You wound too tight. One day you're gonna snap. I'm trying to help you with your mental health," she said. Titus thought she did it because she knew he hated it. She knew they'd argue, and she also knew they'd make up furiously. He let her aside. Kelly was the past. Darlene was his present. And despite what Faulkner said, that part of his life was done. Best to leave it where he left it. He pushed his regular clothes to the left. His uniforms were on the right side of the closet, and they were all the same color. Deep brown shirt, lighter tan brown pants with a dark brown stripe down the leg. He had 2 bulletproof vests that hung to the far right of the closet, 2 pairs of black leather shoes that sat on the floor, and a brown tricorn hat that sat on the shelf. Darlene called it his Smokey the Bear hat. Because you're my big old bear, she said one night as she lay across his chest, her fingers playing across the scar on his chest like a pianist playing the scales. The scar was a gift of sorts, from red to cream. White supremacist, Christian nationalist, militia leader, and for 7 terrible minutes, a wannabe martyr. Those 7 minutes had changed all their lives. Titus's, Red's, and those of Red's wife and his 3 sons, who had all been outfitted with grenade vests. The youngest boy had only been 7 years old. His vest had hung loose on his shoulders like a hoodie he'd stolen from one of his brothers. When he pulled that pen, his face had been as blank as a sheet of notebook paper. Then it had. Stop it, Titus said out loud to no one. He rubbed his face with both hands. The shrapnel from the explosion had left that question-shaped mark, burned scar on his chest. The scars on his soul were not as visible, but were no less horrific. Titus put on his uniform in an off-practice ritual that calmed him. First he put on his vest and strapped it in place. Then he grabbed his shirt, then a brown necktie that hung next to his 2 brothers on a hook on the inside of the closet door. Next were his pants and his shoes. Then he went to his nightstand, opened the drawer, and grabbed his service belt. He cinched it tight before grabbing the key from the nightstand and carefully dropped it to his haunches. A sheriff couldn't be seen in the county with wrinkled pants. And a black sheriff had to have an extra pair of pants in his office just in case. He pulled a metal box from underneath the bed and unlocked it. Inside was his service pistol. The county would only pay for a Smith & Wesson 9mm, but Titus wanted something with more stopping power. He purchased a 6 Sauer P320 out of his own pocket. It was the same sidearm the Virginia State Police used. He checked the clip and the chamber before sliding in the holster. There were 2 pairs of mirrored sunglasses on top of the nightstand. Titus grabbed one pair and slid into his shirt pocket. His radio was on top of the nightstand next to the sunglasses. Finally, he picked it up, clipped the transponder to his belt and the mic to his collar. Lastly, he reached in the drawer and grabbed his badge. He pinned it to his shirt above his left pocket and headed downstairs. Albert was still sitting at the table, but now the newspaper was gone. In his place was an envelope bearing Titus's name. What's that? Titus asked, even though he was pretty sure he knew. Well, it's been a year. Reverend Jackson said last Sunday it was still a miracle you won. It was a miracle worth praising. Who knew Ward Bennett getting hit by a logging truck would mean the first black sheriff of Charon County would win a special election, Albert said. Titus picked up the envelope. He tore it open with his thumbnail. Inside a greeting card was a comical penguin holding a devilish pitchfork was on the front. On the inside of the inscription read, "Guess hell really froze over. You 2 are still together. Happy anniversary." Titus raised his eyebrows. Albert shrugged. Well, Walmart don't have a card saying, "I'm proud of you, son, for being the first black sheriff." I am proud. My boy back home and changing things. You know how much seeing you in that uniform means to people, Titus. If your mama was here, she'd be proud too, Albert said, his voice breaking a little bit around the edges. Titus' mother had been gone for 23 years, and yet the mere mention of her still wrung heartache from his father like water from a washcloth. Would she be so proud if she knew what had happened in northern Indiana at the Crane compound? I don't think so, Titus thought. No, I don't think she'd be proud at all. Not all people are proud, Pop, but thank you for the card. Albert sucked his teeth again. You talking about that Aslan boy of the New Wave Church? Ain't nobody thinking about him. He thinks Jesus wear blue jeans, Albert said. That was the worst insult his Pentecostal Baptist father, who wore his best suit every Sunday, could utter in reference to the dreadlocked New Age minister. Oh, Poppy's doing good work over there at that church, Titus said. You call that place a church? Sound like a juke joint when I drive past, I always said. Titus sighed. Anyway, Jamal Addison ain't the only person who think I'm Uncle Tom, Titus said with a rueful smile. Well, Reverend Jackson, I was preaching about being wary of false prophets, Albert said. Titus thought that was ironic, but didn't say anything. Yeah, you know, it'd be nice if you came to service once in a while. Don't nobody at the church think you know damn Uncle Tom, Albert said. They work hard for you, son. I'm just saying. The amount and depth of his gratitude to Emmanuel Baptist Church for their support in his surprise campaign was a conversation his father kept trying to have and Titus kept trying to avoid. Not because he wasn't grateful. He was. He was well aware of the support of congregations like Emmanuel had propelled him to the sheriff's office, along with an influx of liberal-minded Latter-day hippies and good old boys and girls who hated Warren Benning's son Cooter more than they despised or distrusted the former football hero and FBI agent. It was a rare coalition that came together that wouldn't happen again for a generation. But now everybody had their hands out. And his father's church was no different. He knew that the support of his father's congregation came with condition that he wasn't inclined to meet. Never mind the fact he hadn't attended an actual church service since he was 15. He stopped going about the same time his father started. 2 years after his mother died. I'll let you know, Pop. You know, it's the week before Fall Fest, and things gonna get busy for me, Titus lied. Fall Fest was mainly an excuse for the citizens of Charon County to get drunk and dance in the street before slipping off to some dark corner of the courthouse with a whiskey-soaked kiss from a lover, either theirs or someone else's. Albert was about to press his case further when Titus's radio crackled a light. Titus, come in. The voice on the radio was his dispatcher, Cam Crowder. Cam worked the morning shift, and his other dispatcher, Kathy Miller, worked at night. Cam was one of the few holdovers from the previous administration. He was an Iraqi war vet who was calm under pressure, who possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of every road and dirt lane in Charon County. And despite these impressive credentials, Cam's most important attribute was proximity. He lived less than a mile from the sheriff's office, and he never missed a day, come rain or shine. His all-terrain electric wheelchair could get up to 20 miles per hour. Cam had souped it up himself with help from a YouTube video and some PDFs that Titus had downloaded for him. The man was nothing if not determined. That was why the hopelessness that seeped into his voice and came spilling out the radio set Titus's nerves on edge. Go ahead for Titus, he said, after he depressed the talk button. Titus, there's an active shooter at the high school. Titus, I'm getting 100 calls a minute here, man. Titus, I think my nephew's still there, Cam said. He sounded strange. Titus realized he was crying. Cam, call all units. Have them converge to the high school. Titus shouted into the mic. My nephew is there, Cam whispered. Call all units, Cam. Do it now. Cam groaned, but when his voice came through the speaker, this time it was smooth and resolute. Got it, Chief. Calling all units. Active shooter at Jefferson Davis High School. Pete, active shooter at Jefferson Davis High School. Titus dropped the greeting card and sprinted for the door. What's going on, son? Albert called after him as he barreled out the back door. The only answer he got was the sound of the screen door slamming against the jamb as the autumn wind caught it in his chilly grip. And then Titus was gone. Thank you. I'm gonna do a Garrison Keeler and do a pray home from heaven and sit down. We're all late will be gone. We're gonna have those nasty biscuits. So basically, in the fall of 2021, after my last book, Razorblade Tears, had come out, so my first book with Flatiron Books, Black Hot Wasteland, had done really well. Wasn't a bestseller, but it did really good. And it changed some things in my life. You know, made me be able to be a full-time writer, which I appreciated. I'm still grateful for. But it still didn't, it wasn't like a massive hit. It was, you know, it won a lot of awards. But sometimes the awards don't translate to sales, but they're nice to have. But Razorblade Tears was like a paradigm shift for me. It changed everything. It was a bestseller. It was on the Jimmy Fallon summer reading list. It was on former President Barack Obama's summer reading list. It was nominated for the Lifetime Book Award. It won the Anthony. It won the International Thriller Award, the Buried, the Cavity. Stuff y'all probably don't know what that is, but that's like a big deal. Kind of a big deal, because I didn't think I was going to win it again. And we didn't have the award ceremony called BoucherCon in 2020 because of the pandemic. So we had it in 2022. And, you know, a bunch of us went to Minneapolis for this big event. And I got to meet Dennis Lehane, which is great. Dennis Lehane, nice dude in the world, by the way. He's just the nicest. You want to laugh? Go on Twitter and search hashtag BoucherCon 2022. Dennis Lehane is in every picture. He's had the best time of anybody there. He got a scotch and soda in every picture. He's super nice. He told us, some of my friends that were there, he told us this really funny story about getting in a fight with David Duchovny in the set of the X-Files, which I can't do the story justice, but it's hilarious. So anyway, you know, it had Razorblade Tears had really changed our life. I remember when I found out it was going to be on Obama Summer Reading List, I was writing what ended up being All the Sinners Bleed. And one of my friends, my phone started vibrating, and my friend texted me. She's like, "Hey, you been on Twitter today?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "You should go on Twitter." I was like, "Why?" She's like, "Just go on Twitter." And I was like, "Am I being canceled?" He's like, "I haven't punched a baby or kicked a dog in years, so I have not kicked a dog." I mean, that baby had it coming. No, I'm kidding. So anyway, I go on and you see it. It's there. And I'm so dumb. I didn't realize that I was on the list. I saw myself tagged in a bunch of tweets. I'm like, oh, it's Obama Summer Reading List. And I saw people that I knew were on the list. Like, oh man, it's Robert Jordan. Oh, it's Sylvia Marcia Moreno on it. And then I look at the bottom and there's my name. And I remember running into the living room. My partner was sitting there. And she's watching Price is Right. And I run in and I'm crying and laughing at the same time. She goes, "What's wrong? I don't know about this." And so I say all that to say that when I got ready to start All the Sinners Bleed, I put a lot of pressure on myself. You know, nobody put that pressure on me. It wasn't the publisher. It wasn't my agent. I did it to myself. Because I kept thinking, it's got to do what Razorblade did. It's got to be the same hit. It's got to have the same impact. And that sort of stress is like too much sugar to tea. It ruins it. And I could not get the book going. It wouldn't do what I wanted it to do. If there's any writers in the audience, you know what I'm talking about, when a book just do not want to listen to you and you can't wrestle it to the ground. You know, writing a book sometimes is like Jacob wrestling an angel. It really is. And I ended up having a conversation with another friend of mine who's a writer named Eric Pruitt. He gave me a really good piece of advice. He said, you know, this book that you're writing, it ain't got to be as good as Razorblade. It just got to be good. If it's good, that's all that matters. And that sort of like dropped the scales from my eyes. But even then, it was still an intense situation because I originally wanted to write this book about policing in America. I wanted to use fiction to talk about police brutality, police violence, police corruption in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And when I realized that fairly early on is that I don't have enough emotional distance from that issue. And so I couldn't give it the due deference that it needed. You know, nobody wants to read a 300-page sermon, you know, and that's what it was becoming. It was a polemic. And, you know, Papa Stevie King says, you know, it doesn't matter what you want to talk about. Story is first. Story is paramount. The story is no good. Nobody cares what you're trying to say. So I took a step back. I threw away like 20,000 words that weren't working. And then I ended up having lunch with a friend of mine who's a former minister. And we were talking, and he said something that kind of clicked for me and what I wanted to do with the book. He said, you know, one of the things that I regret when I was a minister is that I didn't really speak up for the least of us. You know, I was speaking toward the elders or the deacons. I was speaking toward the trustees. I was speaking to the crazy tithes. But I wasn't doing what Christ had asked us to do. I wasn't helping the poor. I wasn't helping the downtrodden, you know. And so that sort of set something in my mind where I wanted to create a story. I wanted to create a character who helped the least of us. And that's what Titus ended up being. It's funny though, because the first 8 chapters, he didn't have a name. He was just Black Sheriff. And it was like doing a double bill with Black Lightning on Saturday morning on the Justice Friends. But I wanted to create a character who, there's a TV show, I don't know how many of you guys have watched it, called True Detective. And season 1 is just a masterpiece. It's an 8-hour movie. It's not a TV show really. And you know, Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson play these 2 police officers in Louisiana. investigating a series of Gothic serial killings. And I got to meet the guy who created it, Nick Pizzolatto, in LA a couple of years ago. And we were having a drink. By the way, Nick is an intense individual. I'm not going to say he's on any altered substances, but his eyes are real big when he talks to you. And but he did say something that really stuck with me. He says, Marty and Russ, the characters on True Detective, they're not good men. They really aren't. He said, but when the darkness arose, they didn't avert their eyes. And there was something portentous about that. There was something biblical in that phrase. And I wanted to create a character in Titus who's not a perfect man. I think he's better than Marty and Russ, but he's not perfect. But when the darkness arose, he didn't avert his eyes. He stands in the gap between the people of the town that he loves, even though that town doesn't always love him back, and the evil that's trying to infect it. And so that gave me just a different perspective on the book. So, like I said, I'm from a small town in Virginia. I grew up in Chesapeake Bay, swimming in the tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay, and fighting dogfish and getting bit by crawfish. And that's not fun. But I grew up in a small town of 8,000 people, and I know all of them. So I'm related to half of them, which make dating terrible. You can't ever go out with nobody in town. It's like you come home, like, I met this girl at home. I'm like, that's your cousin. Is she? Is she really? She got pretty eyes. But anyway, in this small town, 8,000 people, there's 23 churches. I know because I counted them. And so this idea of this sort of Flannery O'Connor quote, which I quote in the book about the South being maybe not Christ-centered, but Christ-haunted, I think it's haunted by the hypocrisy of Christianity. Christianity in and of itself is not evil, it's not bad, it's not terrible. But my mama used to say all the time that the word is Saracen and man is corrupt. And when man speaks the word, he corrupts it. And so I do think that is something that we do. There are many, many churches, and I'm not telling y'all nothing y'all don't know, that are more concerned with the robes on the pastor than the clothes on the poor. This little boy a couple states over that wouldn't open his church to hurricane victims a couple of years ago. And so I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about how religion in small towns can be a comfort and also a cudgel. It can bring us together, it can drive us apart. And I wanted to create in Titus a character who is finding his spiritual path. Now, the book is not a spiritual book, it's not a religious book, but it is a book, I think, that says something that I believe, which is you don't have to go to church to be spiritual. You don't have to go to church to be a good person. You can find spirituality in the woods, in the trees. You can find spirituality fishing. You can find spirituality walking along a riverbank if you want to. And it also says, I think, that when that evil arises, will you be the one to stand up? Will you be the one to stand in that gap? And Titus is a character I'm very proud I created. People ask me all the time, who's your favorite character? I don't have a favorite character, but there are characters I've created that I would love to hang out with, and there are characters I've created that I would call if I was in trouble. Like Bug from Black Dot Wasteland. I don't know if I have a beer with Bug, but I definitely would call him if I needed to move a body. I'll tell you a funny story about Bug. Every Mother's Day, there's a movie called 310 and Yuma, starring Russell Crowe and Christian Bale, and I love that movie. You want to see a grown man cry? Watch me at the end of 310 and Yuma. Crying like a baby. When Christian Bale tells his son, you tell everybody that your daddy walked midway to that truck, just boo-hooing. Oh my God. I remember I was in the movie theater watching it. The lady I didn't know, my partner was sitting to the right of me, and this lady I didn't know was rubbing my back because I was crying so hard. It's going to be all right. And, but there's a line in that movie where Russell Crowe has been insulted by this deputy for the whole movie. The deputy says terrible things, awful things about Russell Crowe's mother. Finally, he can't take it anymore. He breaks loose. He drags him to the edge of a cliff. He says, you know what, Byron, I always liked you, but you ain't never know when to shut up. And right before he pushes him off the cliff, he says, even bad men love their mamas. He pushes him off the cliff. And I said on Twitter, I think Bug would concur with that idea. And a lady came into the tweet and was like, Bug is not a bad man. Don't say that about him. I'm like, did you read the book? He killed like 9 people. I mean, I'm just saying, I like the dude, I created him, but he's not a good dude. He's a high-functioning sociopath. But Titus isn't that. Titus is somebody I can see myself having a beer with. Titus is somebody I can see myself disagreeing with about his ideas, because I think for Titus, he really thinks that if he metes out justice equally, then justice will be equitable, And it's hard when the justice system doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's inherently unequal. And so Titus is the character that I would introduce to my mom if she was still here. I wouldn't introduce Bug or Ike or Buddy Lee or some of the other guys I created. Even Nathan, because Nathan's a little too promiscuous to be around my mama. And so that was where Titus and All Sinners Bleed came from. I wanted to talk about religion. I wanted to talk about the South. You know, I get asked a lot of times. I've been very, very blessed. The past month, I've been all over the country. And people always ask me, it's like, oh, when do you leave Virginia? When you move to New York? When you move to L.A.? And, you know, I love the South. I love Virginia. I love where I come from. You know, I grew up there. The church I go to was founded by my great-great-great-grandfather in 1867. The South is my home, and I firmly believe this, that I have as much right to the South as anybody else. You know, there are people who will tell you that the South is the sole providence of neo-Confederate apologists, and nothing could be further from the truth. Because every scrap of ground that somebody who is a Confederate apologist walks on, somebody who looks like me has bled and died and lived there, and I'm not ceding 1 inch to anybody. You know, I love that place. I love where I come from. But to paraphrase James Baldwin, because I love the South, I reserve the right to criticize it, because I know it can be better than what it is. Some of my most favorite memories of growing up around my aunts and my uncles, my grandmama, my granddaddy, sitting on the porch, you know, drinking moonshine, having a cookout, you know, standing around these backyard orators and these barbecue raconteurs and being a part of this incredible tradition of storytelling that I got from my uncles and my cousins and, you know, and my family. My family was will probably always be very gregarious, very verbose. They're a little mean. So it's like, don't come around if you got soft feelings. So it's like, you know, I remember my granddaddy, somebody asked him how his sister was doing. He's like, she's still big as hell. And they were like, don't say that, that's mean. He said, why not? Her shadow weighs 70 pounds. Oh my God. So I grew up in that environment. You had to be very quick with it. My uncles told great stories. My aunts told great stories. They were all great readers. And so the books that I write, the stories that I tell are a tribute to all of them. You know, it's my honor. I feel like it's my duty to tell those stories and to share those stories with people. And, you know, All Sinners Bleed is just another iteration of that. You know, like I said again, people always ask me, are you going to move away? I'm like, no, I like where I come from. I like waking up in the morning, looking in the backyard and seeing baby deer or seeing a flock of wild turkeys or these squirrels that my partner hates, but I feed them anyway. And so I love where I come from, and I love being able to tell stories, and I love being able to share it with all of you. It really means the world to me. Like I said, I grew up dirt full of poor. If you go back in time to like 1991 and find 16-year-old, still had hair, Charon Cosby, S.A. Cosby, and told him one day, the former president of the United States is going to know your name. Your books are going to be on television. People all across the country are going to read your books, and not only read them, but like them. I think he would have told you were crazy. Grown-ass Charon Cosby has to stop himself from crying every day thinking about it because it means the world to me. So thank you guys for coming out. I appreciate it. And I'll take some questions. I guess just raise your hand and I'll call on you, I guess. Don't be shy. Somebody, come on. Yeah, right here.
Hey, man. How you doing?
All right.
I guess you could say, this might not be too big of a superlative to say, that you're the biggest name in crime fiction right now. At least one of. So I'm wondering, you did...
Michael Collins still sells a lot of books.
Yeah. I mean, you balanced the literary and the pulp really well. You did a heist novel, you did a revenge novel, you did like a true type novel. I'm kind of wondering, what's on the back burner? What's next for you?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think all crime writers have a heist novel, they have a revenge novel, and a serial killer novel. You watch that with Dennis Lehane. You know, he did a heist novel, does a revenge novel, he does a great serial killer novel called Darkness Take My Hands, my favorite book by him. I love that book. I think for me, a couple things. When I first started writing, I was really working through sort of these ideas of my masculinity, about toxic masculinity, tragic masculinity, what it means to be a man in rural America, in a place that a lot of people have forgotten, you know, and what it means to be a black man in those places. And I think I've kind of worked through that, you know, hopefully. I don't have to keep going to a therapist now. And so I think the next thing I want to do is talk about family. I want to write, I'm actually starting in the beginning stages of a book about a family. It's sort of this dynamic between siblings and family, and how, you know, the sort of idea that there are people, everybody has people in their family that you can depend on. And everybody has people in their family that you can't depend on. You know, if you want to get something done, you call Aunt Sally, you call Uncle Joe. And if you want to have a good time, you call Cousin Dante, you call Cousin Billy. And so I want to talk about what that dynamic looks like through the prism of a crime novel. So I'm working on something right now called King of Ashes. It's about 3 siblings and their father owned a crematory in Virginia. And at the beginning of the book, the oldest, there's two brothers and a sister. So it's an older brother, a middle sister, a younger brother. The oldest brother actually lives in Atlanta. He's a financial advisor to like hip-hop folks and stuff. And he gets a call one day after a party that he's been to that his dad's in a coma. He's been in a car accident. He has to come home. When he comes home, he finds out that his youngest brother is in debt to some local gangster in the tune of like $300,000. And they're the ones that ran the father off the road. And they're the ones that's the reason he's in a coma. And so as he tries to negotiate with these gangsters, they beat him and the brother up. And he, under duress, makes an agreement with them that he'll give them financial advice, but also he'll let them use crematory to get rid of their enemies if they so desire. And so what he finds out as he does that is that he's really good at being a criminal. And he really likes it. But it's like sort of, if you find your purpose, and your purpose is something awful, or you're obliged to follow it. And then also there's a secret in their family. Their mother disappeared when they were teenagers. Everybody thinks their father killed her and burned her up in the crematory because she was cheating on him. And everybody knew it. And so there's a secret that hangs over their head. So that's what I'm working on now. And it's sort of this idea of a family dynamic as opposed to like these sort of lone wolf individual iconoclastic characters that I've written. So thank you. Anybody else? Somebody else? Yes.
Yeah, I really like the thoughtful way that you dedicate your books. And I appreciate, that's what I'm always going to look at first to see where the dedication is and the way you just talked about your family. But I particularly like the one to your grandfather. And I wondered how you go through that process of the dedication and actually thinking about that family member while you're working on the book.
So, thank you. That's a great question. My family's very important to me. I come from a big family. My daddy has 11 brothers and sisters. My mama has 6. I have thousands of first cousins. Again, they are in a small town. And so, but no, like I said, my family members were very supportive of me as a kid when I wanted to read. I was a voracious reader as a child, still am. And so my grandmother read romance novels. My mother read biographies in Greek mythology. And my aunt read horror novels. My first Stephen King novel came from my aunt Marguerite. And she remember she was telling me, she was like, you read this, are you going to be okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine. I'm like 11. She's like, don't get scared because I don't want your mama to get mad at me. I'm like, I'm good. Then I slept with like a popsicle made cross under my bed. For like the next 6 weeks, waiting for Ralphie Glick to come to the window. Stole one of my grandma's silver butter knives. It was like, I'm ready. I had an uncle who read Raymond Chandler and Travis McGee. Now, my grandfather couldn't read. My grandfather was illiterate, but he had an incredible memory. He would tell us all these incredible stories. Some true stories about the town we grew up in. Some stories that were folklore that he had been passed down. You know, I heard my first Prairie Rabbit story from my grandfather when I was 7. And my grandfather was a very tough man. Very tough dude. He had broke his collarbone when he was 12, working in a sawmill. And he couldn't go to the hospital. He never said it. So one side of his body leaned to the right. But when I tell you that man was strong as Hercules, he was strong as Hercules. And he could be gentle, you know. I remember one time I had a really bad fever, had bad flu. My grandfather sat up with me all night rubbing alcohol on my chest and putting Vicks vapor rub behind on my nose and just sitting there with me, helping me through that fever. So that sort of masculinity that I had example of him. And then again, he would tell me stories, you know, and I wanted to dedicate my first book to him because it was the first book that I finished. And it was the first time I really tried to embrace that storytelling tradition. I'll tell you a real quick story of my granddad. So back where I come from, Matthews, the Fall Fest in the book is referencing what we call Market Days, a big festival in September. You know, again, just excuse people getting the street drink because we block the rail on each end, and then people make like whiskey watermelons and stuff. So everybody's just torched the whole night. And when I was a little boy, I think I was 9. My grandfather and my grandmother took me down there to Fall Fest because my mom couldn't drive. My mom was disabled when I was a child, just by stenosis. So my grandfather and grandmother took me down there. And we're sitting down there, and there was some young boys running around. They had too many whiskey watermelons. And they were cursing. They were saying really terrible, horrific curse words. My grandfather, hey, watch your mouth, there's a lady present. And one of them said, shut up, old man. And my grandfather was like, what, I couldn't hear you. Come here, I couldn't hear what you said. And the guy got closer, and my granddaddy fish hooked him in his mouth. And pulled him down to his knees. And said, say it again. Say what you said again. And I remember my grandmother like, Ozzy, let that boy go. And I remember turning to my brother, and my brother would be like, we can't go nowhere with granddaddy. We got to fight. And so, but that same man was just an incredibly, I remember my grandfather, I'm actually writing a story about it for Southwestern Review. My grandfather used to trap rabbits in snare traps, and we'll cook them and stuff. And I remember I went with him to open the snare traps one day, and you know, anybody who's ever hunted, the worst sound in the world is a rabbit caught in a trap. It's the worst thing ever. And I told my granddad, I said, I'd rather we just shoot them. I can't stand this. My granddad was like, well, you know, we got to trap them, we got to eat. And I said, can we just shoot them? I can't stand this anymore. I can't do this. And my grandfather looked at me and said, you know what? You're right. And he never used a snare trap again. And so he had this sort of sensitivity in him that I admire as a man, you know, because he was the same man, like I said, fish with people. And so, you know, my family is just such an incredible source of pride for me. And nobody believes in me the way my family does. So I dedicate, you know, this book is dedicated to my brother. You know, previous book was dedicated to my mom. Book before that, my dad. Book before that was my grandfather. I'm running out of relatives. I got to figure somebody else to dedicate the next one to. I know, right? I got so many cousins, though. Oh, my God. I pick one, the rest of them will be mad. That's right. Any other questions? Don't be shy. Go ahead, raise your hand. Ask me anything. Yes.
So think about the family and everything. Titus's mother and father, Helen and Albert. There's all these great sayings you have throughout the book, and I didn't know if that came organically just through writing the character, or if you just got like a stash of sayings that you're just sitting on.
They're all my mama's sayings. Like, they're all my mom's saying. You know, she used to say all the time. She's like, you know, going to church don't make you a Christian. I can roll around and slop don't make me a pig. You know, so my mom was a very witty woman, and I love being around her. She's very very quick-witted, very smart. You couldn't fool my mom. Couldn't fool my mom no bit. I remember my brother, one time my brother was seeing these 2 girls. He was in high school, and one of them called the house, and this is back before you had cell phones. So she called the house, and my brother told my mom, "Tell her I'm not here, mama." And my mom was like, "All right, okay." And she's like, Larry, yeah, Daryl said he's not here. And I'm like, that's the way she was. That's the way I think Helen is. So, but yeah, if you come to my hometown and you hang out with any of my family members, you'll hear all those sayings, all those colloquialisms. They're all part of my upbringing and my background, and it's my honor to sort of articulate those in the book. So I try to like keep those things alive. So yeah, any other questions? Ask me anything. Ask me anything you want. I don't care. Nothing off limits. Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
What do you have to write? Some people have to have certain things in order and this, that, and the other. So what is your regimen?
So not this hat, but I have another hat that looks like it got run over by a truck. It's my wife is my partner, but she begs me to get rid of it. But it's like I wrote my first book wearing it, so now I'm superstitious. I can't write without it, so I have to have a hat. I have a bottle of single barrel Woodford Reserve that I only crack open when I write, and I only take 2 fingers, no ice, and I'll sip on that as I'm writing. What else? Oh, so my first big check from writing, I got my first royalty check, and the first thing I did was I ran out and I bought me and my daddy matching recliners. And, which he won't sit in his. Oh my God, it makes me so mad. I go into his house, and I'm like, why is the plastic still on it? I don't want to mess it up. We got the receipt. It's all right. You can sit in it. But that recliner has I remember when I was a kid, and my grandpa had a leather lazy boy. My grandpa had real bad back problems. And I was like, man, when I get older, I want a recliner. It has like a heater and a muscle relaxer and all that, muscle massager. It's got all that. It's got a cooler on the side. It's got a little place for the remote control. So I sit in there and eat. And when I do that, I put on my earphones. And my partner, God bless her, I think she's learned it now. When I first started writing, I don't think she took me seriously. So when I would write, she would always interrupt me, like, "Oh, you gotta look at this thing on the news, or this thing is happening." And I'm like, "I'm trying to write." And now, since the books are doing well, she don't want to say anything. But I wear earphones and I listen to music. I love listening to music. A lot of writers can't. A lot of writers have to have silence. But I make playlists up for my books, and then I listen to them as I write. So I love doing that. I have my cat. I used to have a dog. I used to have a pug. That was my buddy. And he would sit at my feet. And I would fall asleep writing. Like, I'd write late into the night. I don't write late anymore. Now, because I'm working full-time as a writer, I write. Like, I get up at 9. I write from 10 to, like, 1. Take a break. Have lunch with my partner. And then I'll write from, like, 3 till 6. But when I first started writing, I was working a full-time job. And I would fall asleep, and my dog would jump in my lap and lick me in the face to wake me. Like, all right, it's time to go to bed. But now my cat, he sits at my feet and kind of, like, keeps my feet warm. So those are my must-haves when I'm writing. So, anybody else? Yes.
Any TV or movie adaptations of your works in the
Yes.
works? Okay.
And so here's the thing. It's funny because I always feel like I'm bragging when I say it. And you know, y'all from the South, you know, my mama used to tell me, don't brag. You know, don't talk about love, no money. But with people outside the family. But all 4 of my books have been optioned for movie or TV. So, All Sinners Bleed, I haven't announced it yet, but I'll tell y'all, don't tell anybody. All Sinners Bleed is an option by Netflix for an 8-episode series. It's being produced by the guy who's the co-writer of the Black Panther movie, so he's going to run it. Raised by Tears was getting ready to do scouting production stuff before the writer's strike started, and I fully support the writer's strike, so I'm also hoping it's over soon. All the Sinners, Blacktop Wasteland is in production hell right now, so we don't know what's going to happen with that. But My Darkest Prayer was optioned by a production company, Charon Production, and they're taking it to Apple TV to make it a TV series. So,
Wow.
all of those. Raised by Tears was funny because, so when we were shopping around for movie deals, my agent, he says, "Hey, the people from Paramount want to meet with you. They want to make you an offer." I'm like, "Okay." And of course, it's during the height of the pandemic, so we did it on Zoom. And he said, "I'm not going to be on the Zoom call, but, let me know what they say." I'm like, "All right." So we get on Zoom. The Zoom windows pop open. And one of them is like a production assistant. The other one's a production assistant. And then the third one is Jerry Bruckheimer. Wow. And he's sitting there, like, his background is this reverse concave window of Malibu. And my background is the 4x4s and cinder blocks I had that make my show. And so he doesn't say anything at first, right? So the production assistants, just so y'all know, if you're ever in this situation, when people want to buy your book for a movie or something, they tell you you're the best thing ever. They'll tell you everything up to your fart smell like cotton candy. And so they're just blowing my head up. "Oh, you're the best, you're this, you're that." And I'm like, And finally, Mr. Bruckheimer raises his finger. He's like, "Sean, Jerry." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, I saw Top Gun." And he's like, "I really love your book. I love this conversation we're having, but I really got to know, how much money is it going to take for us to be in business together?" And I was like, "I don't know." And so I had my phone under the desk, so I text my agent. I'm like looking down surreptitiously. I'm like, "They want to know how much money you want." So my agent says, "Save this number. It's this huge 6-figure number. He said, "They'll never go for it. And we'll negotiate. We'll meet in the middle." I'm like, "All right, okay." So I go back to the Zoom. I said, "Well, Mr. Bruckheimer, I don't think we could be in business for anything less than blankety, 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 blank." He's like, "All right, let's sign it." He didn't blink. I wish I'd known that. I asked him more. But yeah, they took it and they wrote a script, and there's these 2 great guys, and Trayvon Free and Martin Rowe were directing it. I got to talk to, so I'll tell y'all this. So a couple weeks after that, my agent calls me again. He's like, "Hey, there's somebody who wants to talk to you on Zoom about the movie role, about Buddy Lee." I'm like, "Okay, who is he?" He's like, "I'm going to surprise you. I'm not going to tell you who it is." I'm like, "All right." So he gives me the Zoom link. And you know how Zoom is, like, host will let you in momentarily and all that. So I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting, I'm looking at my watch, and the screen pops up. And it's Matthew McConaughey. That's what my wife said. And so he's like, "Hey, man, I just want to talk to you about Buddy Lee. I think he's a really good character." And I'm like, "Oh, my God." And we talked for about 5 minutes. And it wasn't very long at all. And he said, "Well, maybe we can be in business together. I hope so. I really love the book." And so my partner, she's sitting in the corner, like looking around the door, and she's like, "Don't say a thing. And so I said, are you, can you say the thing? And he kind of smiled, like, what thing? You do, man, say the thing. So he kind of looked off, he was like, all right. That was fun. I don't know if this would be the movie, but he really wanted to do it, so we'll see what happens with that. That was a lot of fun. And I've gotten to meet like the directors. They're really cool guys. The script they wrote is really good. I'm looking forward to seeing like when somebody writes a script based on your book, they don't really have to do anything. They do what they want. They make it whatever they want. And these guys are really respectful of the book. They got it. Like 90% of the script is stuff that I wrote. They just reconfigured it, and it's really incredible that they really gave that kind of attention and detail and care to it. I got to talk to, I met Lee Child one time at a convention, and he said to a bunch of us writers, he said, he's like, somebody making a movie out of your book is like somebody coming to your house to cook dinner. As long as they don't burn the house down and nobody gets food poisoning, it's gonna be all right. That's the way I think of it too. So like, I'm really excited to see. As a movie fan, I just want to see it. I don't really care. I just want to go to the movie theater. I don't even want to tell people I'm there. I just want to sit in the back and watch it. Say based on a book by S.A. Cosby come up. That would be cool. I'll just take a picture of that. That'd be cool. I'm a poor country boy, so it's like seeing my name on screen. That's great. That ain't nothing but the truth. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Chester Himes or Walter Mosley?
Oh, gosh. Why are you making me pick? Oh, man. I'll say Chester just because he was one of the first writers to really, I don't say give you permission, but really open the door to articulate a specific type of black experience in America. I actually think Chester Himes is one of our great American novels, not just crime novels, but just great American novels. He's on par with John Updike and Richard Wright and James Baldwin to me. Although I've hung out with Walter. And Walter's fun. Walter is fun. Walter, a couple weeks ago, I was in New York City for an event called Thrill Fest, which is this big crime fiction writing event. And Walter just comes up to me like I'm somebody. Comes up to me in the hallway. He's like, Sean, Walter Mosley. I'm like, I know who you are. I have all your books. And he says to me, he said, we've met before, haven't we? And I was like, yeah, you remember that? So 7 years ago, no, it's more than that, it's 8. 8 years ago, Walter Mosley came to Virginia, to William & Mary University, and did a lecture series called Write a Novel in a Year, based on a nonfiction book that he had created. And when we got to the end of the program, we went to the program, it was free. We got to the end of the program, I got to sign my tattered, highlighted, broke up version of edition of Devil in a Blue Dress. And when he was signing it, he asked me, he's like, are you a writer? At the time, I hadn't published anything. I said, well, I haven't published anything, but I want to write. And he stops writing, he looks me in the eye, he said, have you finished something? Is there a piece of work that you finished to completion? You worked the end on it. And I was like, well, yeah. He said, then you're a writer. Don't ever say you're not a writer. So many people start stuff they don't finish. And he remembered that, and it blew my mind. So then he invites us to lunch. He invites me and like 2 other writers to lunch at this really fancy club in Harlem that you gotta get buzzed in. And it was like an episode of Guiding Light. I was like, I'm in the Colonnade room here. And so we go up, and so it's 4-level club, and at the bottom is just a bar. And then the second level is a library. And the third level is a performance venue. And the top is a restaurant. It's like a fully stocked bar, full international buffet. They have Chinese, Asian food, Southern food, Italian food, all that stuff. So I get in there, sit down, and he's at the table. He's like, Sean, get something you want. I was like, well, how are we splitting the check? And he said, I'm a member of this club. I paid $4,000 a year. Eat what you want. I was like, oh, you said no but a word. So Walter's become sort of a mentor to me. I really appreciate him. He's such a great guy. He's an incredible writer, but really also a really nice person. So technically Chester Himes, but like I guess I can say me and Walter are friends, kind of. So I'll say that. So thank you for the question. Another question back here somewhere? Somebody raise their hand?
My question was in line with the previous one. I Googled you, and in the different Google statements, you listed several authors that you recommend people read, including, I believe it was Donna Tartt.
Yeah.
So you're not simply, quote, a crime writer. I mean, you are such a prolific reader, but you're such like a Renaissance man. So my question is, who
So the writers that I always will read anything they write, Dennis Lehane, Walter Mosley, and Jesmyn Ward. I love Jesmyn Ward. I think Jesmyn Ward is the heir apparent to Will Faulkner. I really do. She has a new book coming out that somebody got me an advanced copy of it, and I almost cried. Oh my God, I was so excited. So yeah, I read more than crime fiction. I grew up reading more than crime fiction. Like, so my mom, like I said, read biographies. So I read, when I was a kid, she would give me like her biographies of Peter the Great and Ben Franklin and, you know, George Carver and folks like that. And then my grandmother read romance novels. And romance novels help my vocabulary. Because when you're 12, you're like, what does tumescent mean? Oh, gosh. See, y'all know. And so I read romance novels as a kid. Even as an adult, I still read romance novels. Because romance novels and romance novelists are really good at what I call emotional violence. Like, I can write a scene where somebody gets, you know, if you read my books, if you know, there's a term called Chekhov's gun. In an S.A. Cosby book, somebody's going to get hit in the head with a tool. Eventually, like a shovel or a wrench. Somebody's going to get smacked upside the face with a torque wrench. So I can write violence easily, but there's something about emotional violence, that sort of conversation. You ever overheard a conversation where every word sounds like a punch? You know, you're like, oh gosh, oh, we shouldn't be listening, but we can't help it. And so when you read romance novels, like I just read a book by a lady named Kennedy Ryan called Before I Let You Go, and it's such an intense, erotic, but also painful book. And so I read those books to make my characters more emotionally viable. And so I read everything. Like even now I read still historical novels. And I just read a book called City of Quartz about the founding of Los Angeles. So I love reading. I love reading everything. But yeah, Dennis Lehane too. Dennis Lehane is one of those writers that, he's only a few years older than me, but he's one of those writers that, if you're a crime writer of a certain age, it's him, Walter Mosley, and Elmer Leonard on that Mount Rushmore. You know, those are the high bar that you're trying to reach, because it's not just crime fiction; it becomes a literature in their hands, and that's the bar that I'm trying to reach. I want my books to not just be crime fiction, but I want it to be literature. I think all literature is crime fiction. You know, you read a book like Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, or you read like 1,000 Acres by James Smiley. You know, that's a book based on King Lear. There's a lemon cake poisoning. There's a fights and all this. Everything is crime fiction, because here's the thing. I may read a book by Philip Roth. I can't identify with being a humanities professor at an upstate New York college, but I understand desperation. I can read a book by James Michener, and I may not identify with being an explorer in mountains, but I understand loss. And crime fiction is the books. Crime fiction is a genre that encompasses all that. I always say crime fiction is the gospel of the dispossessed. Because not everybody can understand those different aspects of life, but everybody's been short of money. Everybody's been in a situation where they feel like they're back against the wall. And to me, no books articulate that better than crime fiction. And so that's why when people always ask me, somebody asked me one time, when are you going to start writing this crime fiction and write a real book? I mean, they gave me real money for it, so I think it's a real book. I'll keep writing it. They keep paying me. So, any other questions? Go ahead. Anything? Okay. Yes, sir.
Since you mentioned Mosley, Easy Rollins, Mouse, drink with him, go to him to hide a body, or both?
Oh man, you got to be easy with Mouse, man. You got to step on eggshells. You know that I don't know if anybody's read My Darkest Prayer, but the character Skunk is directly based on Mouse. You know, he's Nathan's benevolent sociopathic best friend. It's funny because Mouse seemed the type of guy you could go to a bar, a blues joint, and have a really good time until you're not having a good time. And I know guys, like I had a cousin, his nickname is the Mall, because one time he got in a fight and he hit a dude so hard, the doctor thought he had an attack with a hammer. And I saw that fight. He hit that dude so hard his pants fell down. No lie. Hit that dude sounded like a rifle shot. We were so I grew up behind a juke joint, behind a unlicensed bar and shot house. We were in there one night, and I had no business being. I was 15. I had jumped the fence and come in. And my cousin Maul was big like me, and he's like, "Hey, you want a drink?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So we go to the bar, and there was this dude at the bar with his lady, very lovely older lady. I think, I say older. She probably was 25. I was 15, but she was beautiful. I remember she was wearing this gorgeous green sundress, right? And I just stared at her too. I was 15, I had no concept of social decorum, you know. Raised in the woods, I ran around climbing trees and stuff with no shoes on. And so I just looking at this lady, and the man that was with her, he said, "Oh, you see something you like? You see something?" And I was like stuttering. Now my cousin Maul, he's like, "Hey man, he don't mean no harm by it." And the guy who did not know Maul, who was not around for him, if he had known Maul, he would have walked away. And he said to him, "What you want some too?" And Maul was sitting on a bar stool, and the guy said, "No, I don't want that, man. Go on about your business, all right." And he said, "Come on, let's go outside. Get up off that stool. We're gonna fight." And Maul said, "If I get up off the stool, there ain't gonna be no fight." It's like, and I don't think God understood the menace in that statement. And he said, "Come on, get up, get up." He got up, and when I tell you, he hit this dude, it sounded like a gunshot. And then like the dude fell out backwards, his pants fell down, and then his friends came, and they carried him like a dead man. 2 people on his arm and 2 people on his feet. And the knot on his head, oh my God, it looked like a ping pong ball. And I remember Maul gave me my drink. He said, "Man, it's only 9 o'clock and I already knocked somebody out." I was like, "Well, we don't have to knock anybody else out. I mean, we can just drink the rest of the night." It was so funny because he's such a character, man. He's an influence for a lot of my books. When I got married, he came to my wedding. We had this big wedding reception. And there was a guy there on my wife's side of the family that had too much to drink, and he was kind of making a fool of himself. And Maul comes in, and Maul's like 60 now. Because I'll be 50 next month. He comes up to me. He called me Books. He always called me Books. "Hey, Books, you want me to take care of that guy?" "No, please don't. Please don't. Because you take care of him, he going to lose some teeth." And then we don't need that. That's probably my cousin-in-law. So yeah, Maul is like those guys like Miles. You can have a good time until you're not having a good time. Then everybody got to run. Any other questions? Anybody? Anything? That's it? For sure? All right. I guess that's it. Thank y'all for coming.
Sorry. Yeah, a lot of them.